Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. I'm Janet, and I'm your host. The roots represent the birth parents, the adoptees, and the adoptive parents, while the branches represent the far-reaching effects of adoption on siblings, extended family, and future generations. Today we're speaking to Peter, an adoptee whose journey spans continents, taking Roots and Branches international. Born in England, he moved to New Zealand as a young boy and grew up with adoptive parents he deeply loved. At 18, after moving to Australia, Peter began the search for his biological family. That search took him across the world through DNA tests, unexpected discoveries, mistakes, and breakthroughs, and ultimately led him to the new family connections that reshaped his life. Today, he's taking us on his journey to fulfillment. Oh, Peter, I'm so glad that you're here today, and I can listen to that Australian accent all night long. But thank you for being here, and I'm going to let you tell your story, starting from your birth in England and what happened and how you ended up in Australia.
Well, my birth in England was at 3 minutes past 4 in the morning on the 25th of October 1949, which was a good year for vintage, so not a bad start. And my mother and I had a journey then for about 18 months in the Mission of Hope in Croydon, where I was born. And my mother looked after me through the first 18 months, and then she fell pregnant with her third son, William, and he was born in 1951. At that point, she moved out of the orphanage, and I stayed in the orphanage until I was adopted at the beginning of 1954 by a loving couple who were living at that stage in Harwich. My adopted father was working for Trinity House, and my mother was a housewife. And she thoroughly enjoyed that because now she had me to look after, and that was working out quite well. So we stayed there for a couple of years, I think it was, and then we moved up to Glasgow to live with my mother's older sister and her husband. And then we immigrated out to New Zealand in about 1956, and we moved into a place called Hawke's Bay, and that's where my mum and dad and I settled. And eventually, at the age of, I think it was about 8, I moved onto a farm and lived most of my life on a farm as an only child until I was about 16 or 17. Then I moved out and made my own way in the world. Yep.
You've spoken fondly of your adopted parents. How did their love shape your sense of identity?
They showed me what unconditional love was. So my mum and dad were Christians, and so am I, and they formed my moral background and my ethical background. Church was a very big part of our life. And my father was a lay preacher in the Napier Baptist Church, and I grew up in that and accepted Jesus Christ as my Saviour when I was 13. But unfortunately, when I was 17, I moved away from that for about 13 years and had what I would call a wilderness experience where I wasn't connected to church. I just went from one place to another, just working and living and, basically enjoying myself. But it formed an interesting part of my journey, because I got very involved with living in Japan and working in Japan. So I actually lived in Japan for 14 and a half years. And when I came back to Australia in 1983, that's when I first started my quest for my birth mother. Yep.
Okay, we've talked, so that's when your quest for your biological family started. What information did you have to start with?
Okay, the only information I had to start with was, number one, the Mission of Hope, where I was born, and the name of Rosemary Davies. I think that was it. It might even have been less than that. My parents had a very vague idea of my background, but as I found out later, a lot of that was just hearsay. It was just stuff that was handed down, and it started on a quest. So in 1983, I went to the child welfare here in Australia and asked if they could help me find my biological background, my birth mother. And after a couple of interviews with them, they sent off to the UK, and I ended up with a single sheet of paper with my date of birth, my birth mother's name, and that was basically it. So once I got that, I then asked for the full records of my adoption, and all I got was another single sheet of paper with basically nothing on it. And a couple of years ago, I found out that my birth records were actually 186 pages long and had a massive ring binder full of information, which I have now got. Once again, after a couple of interviews with the adoption agency in London, I was able to procure an electronic plus a hard copy of those records here.
When you began searching, what took you to the DNA testing?
Well, what took me to the DNA was, at that stage, Ancestry was starting. I don't know whether it was in full swing, but it was certainly the agency to go to. So I did a DNA test, and I found out through the DNA the multiple areas that my DNA came from. So there was England, Ireland, lots of middle to northern Europe, and also some from the Iberian Peninsula, which was quite of a surprise. And then I started the quest and put my name in as Peter McRoberts and wondered why I got no hits. So for years I thought this was just a waste of time, and in the end I sort of basically gave up until about maybe 8 years ago, when my wife Sharon and I decided to get into it a little bit more. But I'd also realised that the name was Davies I should have been under, so I started another quest with Davies, and that started to prove a little bit more beneficial because I started to get hits on other people. And eventually, when we were in the UK a couple of years ago, I think that was on our second trip, we actually found a cousin living in Ely, and he was actually more of a half brother, sort of, so to speak. And we came up with him, and Matthew and I got into contact within about half an hour of him coming up on the DNA search. So that was absolutely amazing. And that was just about 2 or 3 days before we were heading to Europe to meet another relative that we found through DNA who was living at that time in Albania. So when I went to meet a friend in Europe, we took a quick trip over to Albania for 3 or 4 days and met with Mark and found out some of our backgrounds there. So one of the things I'd say to people that are looking at doing ancestry tracing things, make sure that you follow up on every lead as quickly as possible, because most of my early connections, unfortunately, ended up in graveyards. Yeah.
So which DNA platforms did you use? Was it
I
strictly
actually
Ancestry?
ended up, I used Ancestry as a beginning because you can transfer your download your DNA from Ancestry, and then you can update it, um, up, whatever, move
Upload?
up. Yeah, you post it onto some other DNA. So I got onto GEDmatch, about 7 of them all together.
23 and me.
Sorry?
23.
23andMe,
Family tree DNA.
Family Tree DNA,
My heritage.
My Heritage.
Living DNA.
I hear
Living
Sharon in the
DNA.
background there teaching you.
Yeah, she's got it all on the top of it.
Genome link.
And Genome Link as well. So my DNA is scattered all over the world.
And that's what you have to do.
But you have to do that to get a true reading of where you actually come from, and also getting relatives. So yeah.
All right. So one of the things that, besides telling them to follow up, make sure they get the right name in for the search.
Absolutely, yeah, and also start a family tree. You need to form a family tree and keep it up to date as much as possible. Yeah.
All right. So how did it feel to discover you were half Irish when you'd always assumed your father was English?
Well, my name's Mick Roberts, so naturally I thought it was Scottish. So when I went into the DNA, I found that I was actually about 45% Irish. And that was a bit of, not a shock, because I know that the Celts intermingled a lot, but it was interesting that my Scottish part was not as great as I thought it was. So yeah. So instead of being a Scot, I found out I was Irish. So maybe that's my love of potatoes coming through.
So searching for family isn't always straightforward, right? What mistakes did you make along the way?
I think some of the mistakes was, number one, like I said, not putting the right name down originally on the Ancestry DNA family tree that I was formulating. The other thing would be to cast your net as wide as possible, and following up any lead you can, and using 192.com is a great asset. Using Facebook. My wife's on Facebook. I'm not on social media, so Sharon's the Facebook entrepreneur in that situation. But basically following up as much as you can, because through my search I found that unfortunately my birth mother died in 2015, and we arrived in the UK in 2017 for our first trip. And then my older brother John, who was born in 1951, he died in the August of 2017, and we arrived in the UK in the December. And the second thing is, my third brother William, who was born in 1951, went into the foster family program in the UK, and he ended up taking up the name of David and the surname of that family. And I was looking for William. I was looking for William Davies, and his name was David Blagden. So we didn't actually make contact, although a couple of times we were within kilometres of each other. And he passed away on the December of 2019. So yeah, it was quite a bit of a shame with that. So yeah.
Did you find all the relatives that you met were welcoming, or were there some that didn't want to connect?
I found all the family were really happy to connect, especially on my Irish side. They were really open arms, and the English side was originally a little bit distrusting. I think, who's this character sort of coming out of nowhere with this claim to being part of our family? But when we all met and got together, it certainly did. It broke down barriers, and then we managed to have a really good relationship, and we still have good contact. But I think the thing is, don't give up after the first or second time, because at the end of the day, we've had a few knockbacks, like people saying, look, we don't want to have anything to do with you, we don't think you're who you say you are and things like that. But you really have to keep on pressing. And the last time we were in the UK, I met my half brother down in the south of England, and we got to the stage where we were leaving England in 10 days' time, and I said, look, I'm not going to pussyfoot around anymore. I'm going to go knocking on doors, and if they don't like it, then I'm sorry about that, but I really need to find out. And I met up with my half-brother, and the moment he looked at me, he said, basically, you're the spitting image of our father. So we had a long conversation, and over the next 2 or 3 days, we established a really good root family, and then I've ended up with more family on that side than I thought, because as we were heading out of the UK, we stopped off at other family members and said hi, and we now have an ongoing relationship with them. And my great niece was born after we were there, so we saw her as a bump, and now we see her as a little baby growing up, almost a year old. So yeah.
You've also connected with people in the US?
Yes. Very early on, when we started doing this in earnest, I managed to contact a cousin in New York, and Tom and I met each other a couple of years ago, and we got on really well together, and we've since been exchanging family relatives. We also met up with relatives in Texas, New Jersey, and yeah, it's just been a marvellous. I've also got relatives in Barrie in Canada. We haven't actually contacted in Barrie in Canada. Yeah,
That's where I live.
Oh, there you go. We might even be related.
No, I don't think so. Oh, well, I was born in England, so.
Right.
I was born in Birmingham
Right.
in 1949, so you're right, it was a very good year.
That was a good year. Yeah. Well, see, part of my maternal side, one of the young ladies actually immigrated to Canada, and that's where the Barrie connection comes in.
Interesting.
So interesting to find all these things out. Yeah.
Yes, Sharon will have to let me know who that connection is, and maybe I can connect as well.
Well, that would be good, because interesting, like we say, leave no stone unturned. You've got to keep on looking. Yeah.
So when you look back, what does this journey mean to you personally?
Personally, it's always interesting to find out where you actually come from, and I think it's really important. So I've met up with an awful lot of people that have, like myself, been adopted, and some of them are still looking for their birth parents or birth parent, and a lot of them unfortunately have this terrible habit of saying, well, everything that's gone bad with me is because I was adopted. Well, I've never had that outlook on life, and I found that as I've gone through, it's filled in a lot of little gaps, filled in some truths, and also filled in or dispelled a lot of myth, because as you're growing up, you get a lot of stories given to you, and this is this and this is that and this is where you came from. But when you actually find out where you actually came from, it's a totally different story. So for me, it was really great. I've now got family all over the world that I didn't know I had, and I'm really thrilled to know that I'm part of a bigger family than just my mum and dad and myself. Yeah.
How big would you say your family is now? How big is that family tree?
Oh, I wouldn't like to take numbers on that. It's just growing exponentially. So every time you meet family, then of course you're meeting their family's family. So it's like when I met my half brother in the south of England, and his family is now part of my family, and my own family with my son and my daughter, and my 6 grandchildren also. It's just amazing. So yeah, the family grows and grows. Yeah.
I know when I met my son who was adopted, one of the first things he told me was that I had 3 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren, which has now increased to 7 great-grandchildren and more. And it just blew my mind right then and there, because I had never expected, I could only remember him as a baby, so I never expected him to be married, have children, anything like that. So just the amount of family, we grew from it was, I think, 6 of us at the time, and we suddenly were 18, and now it's just so much bigger all around, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so, and on the other side of the coin of that is their children are having children, and they're
Yeah.
they're part of your family tree, and also your birthday register gets bigger and bigger. So it's so you're remembering, like I'm remembering Roger, who lives up in Oddenham, and that he's on my maternal side, and then I've got Christopher, who's on my paternal side. I've got his birthday now, and others. It just grows and grows. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to adoptees that are just beginning their search?
Take decisive steps. Take note of all the steps that you're taking, and if you come across a contact, so one of the contacts I had was in the Surrey Historical Society, and the gentleman I was dealing with there, his name is Matthew as well. He was absolutely wonderful. He was worth his weight in gold. He was able to search historical records, and going through those records again just the other week, I noticed there was one notation there of the name David, and I never followed that up because I thought it was a typo for Davies, which is my maternal name. But as I realise now, that David must have been David, who was my younger brother, because that's the name he was going by at that time. So my advice to anybody starting out on the search is, when you do it, if you come across a little which looks like a misspelling or something like that in one of transcripts or notes you find, follow it up, because it may have great consequences. And like I said before earlier in the recording, make sure that you follow up everything and make notes and details of your search, because you never know when one little thing might be such a big lead to something absolutely massive. Yeah.
So if you could go back in time and tell your, say, your 18-year-old self something at the start of this journey, what would it be?
Follow everything up, make meticulous notes, and if there's a lead that you have to follow, then for goodness sake, jump on a plane and go and do it. Because, as I said before, my birth mother died a couple of years before we got to the UK. My older brother died months before we got there, and going over to see my other relative Mark in Albania, it's enriched my life and Sharon's life, because we now have all these contacts overseas that we are in regular contact with, and it also enriches their lives as well as yourself, and I think that's really important.
I agree with you that, yes, the more family is so important to everyone. And there are a lot of people out there that are adopted that haven't found their families yet, and some of them don't want to. I think it's because they're afraid of what they're going to find. More so.
And I think that's what you've got to be aware of. You've got to be aware of that too, because one of the families we reached out to, the husband was actually the family member of mine, so they did a DNA quest, but then they found out, unfortunately, that he was adopted as well. So he was going under my name of Ryan, but he was adopted, so it started a whole quest for him as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
and it proved a bit of a shock to him and his wife. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter, for sharing your remarkable story with us. You've certainly gone on this journey for adoption, and it shows that this journey can hold both a deep sense of belonging with the family who raised you and an enduring curiosity to discover your biological roots. I know through persistence, DNA testing, and courage, Peter reminds us that even after setbacks, connections can be found and family can grow in ways we never imagined. If you connected with Peter's story, please subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can listen to all episodes at rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com. I'm Janet. Thank you for joining me in breaking the silence and stigma of adoption.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.